My family flew overseas to attend my golden sister's dog's birthday. And when I got married, no one came. Every single one of them said they had better things to do than show up to a bum's wedding. My name is Nora Bennett. I was 32 years old, and I sat at a reception with 41 empty chairs and one man who kept holding my hand like it was the only thing in the room worth holding. Let me back up, because you need to understand the dog first. His name was Sir Winston. He was a cream-colored French bulldog that my sister Vanessa bought the same spring Daniel proposed to me. And by that summer, Sir Winston had a better social calendar than most people I knew. He had a groomer on retainer. He had a tiny quilted jacket for cool evenings. And that August, for his first birthday, my sister rented a private terrace at a resort in Lake Como, Italy, and flew 19 members of my family across an ocean to celebrate a dog turning one. I know it was 19 because I counted them in the photos. My mother in a linen dress, laughing. My father lifting a glass. My Aunt Carol, both of my cousins, my grandmother in her good pearls, all of them gathered around a 3-tier cake shaped like a bone, while a dog in a bow tie sat at the head of the table like a little furred emperor. The caption my sister wrote under the album was, "When family shows up, they show up." 206 likes. I remember that number too. My wedding was 3 weeks later. I had booked a small hall behind a vineyard about 40 minutes outside the city. Nothing extravagant. Quick pause before we continue. I'm Clara, the woman behind this channel. I write these stories because I love that little moment when strangers from different places end up feeling the same thing. If this one already pulled you in, stay with me. It goes deeper from here. Nothing extravagant. String lights, folding chairs, a caterer who did a very good roasted chicken, a 2-person band. I had sent 48 invitations to my side of the family and made a seating chart in a notebook at my kitchen table, moving little penciled names around so my grandmother wouldn't be near the speakers, and my mother would have a clear view of the aisle. I had budgeted for all of them. I had paid per plate for people I was sure would come. Nobody came. Not my mother, not my father, not one aunt, not one cousin, not the grandmother in the good pearls. The morning of my wedding, while I was having my hair pinned up in a back room, my phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat. My mother had written it, but the whole family could see it, and the whole family had left it there like a decoration on a wall. We've talked it over. We just have better things to do than sit through a bum's wedding. Nora's making her bed. She can lie in it. When she comes to her senses, we'll be here. My father had reacted with a thumbs up. My Aunt Carol had written, "Amen." Vanessa had sent a little laughing face, and, underneath it, a photo of Sir Winston in a party hat, as if to remind me exactly where the family's attention belonged. A bum's wedding. That was what they called the man I was marrying. Daniel wasn't a bum. Daniel was a software engineer who had quit a comfortable job 8 months earlier to build something of his own, and at that particular moment, he had no salary, a laptop with a cracked corner, and a rented 1-bedroom apartment with a radiator that clanked all winter. To my family, that made him worthless. My mother had once asked me, at a Thanksgiving, I would give a lot to forget, whether I understood that a woman my age couldn't afford to invest in a project that doesn't pay rent. She said it while Vanessa's then-boyfriend, a man who leased a very shiny car he did not own, sat 2 seats down being praised for his ambition. They had a word for Daniel. They had a whole vocabulary for me too. The disappointment, the one who overthinks, the daughter who could have married up and chose to marry a hobby. For most of my life, I had absorbed it the way you absorb weather, hunching my shoulders and waiting for it to pass. But standing in that back room in a dress I had paid for myself, reading the words "bum's wedding" while a hairdresser gently told me to hold still. Something in my chest went very quiet and very cold. Not loud, just quiet. Like a door easing shut somewhere far off in a house. I walked down that aisle anyway. I walked it past 41 empty folding chairs, each one with a little printed name card I had made by hand, my grandmother's card catching the breeze and tipping over onto the grass. Daniel's side of the room was full. His parents were there, warm and teary. His college roommate, two of his friends from the startup he was building, both of whom had put on ties that did not fit them well and cried openly during the vows. There were maybe 30 people in that hall who loved us, and there was an entire empty half where my blood was supposed to be. I made it through the ceremony. I made it through the first dance. Halfway through it, I saw the caterer quietly folding up the extra place settings from my family's tables. 41 plates going back into gray plastic bins, 41 sets of silverware wrapped in napkins that would never be used, and I had to look at the ceiling and count the string lights until my eyes stopped stinging. It was during the toasts, when Daniel's father raised a glass to the strongest woman I've had the honor of adding to my family, that I finally had to step out to the parking lot to breathe. Daniel found me out there a minute later, still in his rented suit, his bow tie already loose around his neck. He didn't tell me not to cry. He didn't tell me they'd come around. He handed me a napkin from his pocket, sat down beside me on the curb in the dark, and let me get it out of my system. When I could talk again, I said the thing I was most ashamed of thinking. Maybe they're right. Maybe I did make a stupid bet. Daniel was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Leave them, Nora." He said it plainly, no drama in it. "We're family now, you and me. That's the whole family, and it's enough." He looked out at the parking lot for a moment, at the string lights glowing through the window of the hall behind us. And then he said the sentence I would carry around in my pocket for the next 3 years like a stone worn smooth from handling. "One day they'll regret this. Not because we'll make them, because they'll see what they threw away." I wanted to believe him. I did. But I had spent 32 years being the family's afterthought, and belief like that doesn't come cheap. I looked at this man in his rented suit with his cracked laptop and his clanking radiator and his big impossible idea, and I thought, I hope you're right. I really, really hope you're right. Then I did something I want you to remember. Because it matters later. I took my phone out. I did not delete the group chat. I did not delete the album of the dog's birthday in Lake Como, or the caption about family showing up, or the thumbs up my own father had left under the word bum. I put the phone in my little clutch, and I closed it, and I went back inside to dance with the only family I had left. Because I had a feeling, even then, that one day every one of those messages was going to matter. I just had no idea how much it would cost them. The first year of my marriage, we lived on a budget of $1,100 a month, and I know that number the way you know your own birthday, because I wrote it at the top of a spiral notebook and did not let it move. Daniel's startup did not have a name that impressed anyone at that point. It was him, 2 friends from his old job, and a plan to build software that helped small logistics companies see where their trucks actually were instead of guessing. When he explained it to people at parties, their eyes glazed over by the second sentence. It was not glamorous. It did not photograph well. There was no dog in a bow tie. It was spreadsheets and code and phone calls to men who ran warehouses in towns I'd never heard of. And for a long, long time, it made no money at all. So I carried us. I had a steady job doing the books for a mid-sized dental group, 3 offices, 40-some employees, and I was good at it. Careful and quiet the way I am with everything. My salary paid the rent on the 1-bedroom with the clanking radiator. It paid for the groceries I stretched into the same 9 dinners on rotation. It paid for the health insurance and the car with the transmission that shuddered at stoplights and the little things that don't sound like much until you're the one covering them. Daniel put every dollar the company earned back into the company. I put every dollar I earned into the 2 of us. That was the arrangement, and I never once resented it, because for the first time in my life, I was building something with a person instead of performing for one. I want to tell you what those nights were actually like, because later everyone would decide it had all been easy, That Daniel was some kind of golden ticket I'd been clever enough to cash. It was not easy. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and the other side of the bed would be cold, and I'd find him at the kitchen table in the dark, the light of the laptop on his face, the cracked corner of the screen taped over so it wouldn't spread. Some nights, he'd have his head down on his arms, not sleeping, just gathering himself. I'd make him a cup of tea he'd forget to drink, and I'd sit across from him, and we wouldn't even talk. And there was more family in that silent kitchen at 2 a.m. than there had ever been at any holiday table I grew up at. My family, meanwhile, went on exactly as before, except now they had a story that made them comfortable. The story was that I had thrown my life away, and that they, the reasonable ones, were simply waiting for me to admit it. My mother called maybe once a month, and every call was a small audit of my suffering. Are you eating? You sound thin. Is he working yet? A real job, I mean. When I said Daniel was working harder than anyone I knew, she'd make a sound in her throat, a little hum of disappointment she'd been perfecting my whole life, and change the subject to Vanessa. It wasn't always like that, and that's the part that still catches in my throat. When I was 9, I won the county spelling bee, and for one single afternoon, I was the center of that family. My father drove me home the long way with the trophy on my lap and told everyone we passed that this was his girl. My mother made my favorite cake from scratch and let me have the first slice. Vanessa, only 7 then, held my hand under the table. For a few hours, I knew exactly what it felt like to be the one they were proud of. And I think a piece of me spent the next 23 years trying to spell the right word again, to earn back an afternoon that they handed to Vanessa permanently and loaned to me exactly once. So when I tell you their coldness hurt, understand it wasn't the cold of people who never had any warmth for me. It was the cold of people who had it and chose, again and again, to point it somewhere else. Because Vanessa was thriving, or at least the pictures said she was. My sister had a way of turning her life into a magazine. That second year, Sir Winston turned 2, and there was another party. This one at a rooftop restaurant with a custom dog cake and a photographer, and once again, the family showed up in force. My grandmother in the pearls, my father in a blazer, my Aunt Carol holding the dog up to the camera like a trophy. The caption that time was, 2 years of pure joy. I looked at it on my phone during my lunch break, sitting in my car in a dental office parking lot with a sandwich I'd made at home. And I felt the old, familiar ache. The one that says, you are standing outside a window, looking in at a warmth that will never be turned toward you. That was the day I stopped trying. Not in a dramatic way. I didn't announce it, I just stopped. I stopped sending the birthday cards that never got acknowledged. I stopped calling my mother back within the hour, then within the day, then at all unless it was truly necessary. I stopped refreshing the group chat, where I was still technically a member, but had become a kind of ghost, present in the little roster of names but never spoken to, watching them plan brunches and trips and dog parties around me as if I were a piece of furniture no one wanted to admit was still in the room. I muted it. I remember my thumb hovering over the leave group button and deciding, no, I'd stay. I'd stay quiet and I'd stay in. And I'd keep every screenshot because some stubborn part of me could not let go of the receipts. Here's a thing I learned in those 2 years that I did not know before. When people decide you are beneath them, they get careless. They say things in writing they would never say to your face. Because in their minds, you don't really count, you're not really listening, you're just the disappointment in the corner. My Aunt Carol once wrote in the chat, not realizing or not caring that I could see it, honestly, it's a relief she doesn't come to things anymore. She brings the mood down. 11 people saw it. Nobody objected. My mother wrote back, let's not be unkind, which is the thing people say when they agree with the unkind thing, but want credit for softness. I screenshotted it. I screenshotted all of it. Not because I had a plan, I didn't. I just could not make myself pretend it hadn't happened. And through all of it, Daniel kept building. The company got a little traction in the 3rd year, a few real customers, enough that the 3 of them could finally pay themselves something close to a salary. We moved out of the one-bedroom into a slightly less small two-bedroom, and I cried in the empty second room. Not because it was much, but because it was ours, and it was going the right direction. Daniel started taking meetings with people who wore better shoes than he did. He'd come home wound tight, talking fast about the round and the raise and terms I only half understood. And I'd feed him and slow him down and tell him to sleep. I did not know we were standing at the edge of something. I thought we were just finally climbing. I thought the story was going to be a slow one, a decade of grinding, a modest, good life earned inch by inch. I had made my peace with that. I had made my peace with a lot of things by then, including the empty half of a wedding hall and a family that flew across an ocean for a dog and couldn't drive 40 minutes for me. Then came the Tuesday in October. I remember it was a Tuesday because I had just finished the dental group's quarterly numbers, and my eyes were tired. I heard Daniel's key in the door earlier than usual, and when he came in, he didn't say hello. He just stood in the doorway of the kitchen with his coat still on and his phone in his hand, and his face was doing something I had never seen it do in 6 years of knowing him. He looked like a man standing very still on top of a wave that hadn't broken yet. "Nora," he said. His voice came out strange, careful, like he was afraid of spilling it. "Sit down. I need you to sit down." I sat. "We got the term sheet," he said. "They sent it an hour ago. It's real. Nora, it's..." And then he stopped, because his eyes had filled, and my unshakable, steady, 2 a.m. husband put his hand over his mouth and could not finish the sentence. The term sheet was the beginning, not the end. And the 11 months that followed were the strangest of my life, because I watched the exact thing my family had mocked turn into the exact thing they would have killed to be near. I need to explain what the deal actually was, because for 3 years, the shorthand in my head had just been Daniel's project. And now it had a shape. A large company, one whose logo you have seen on the side of trucks and on your phone, had been watching what Daniel and his 2 partners built. The little tool that helped small logistics companies see where their trucks were had grown into something much bigger and much smarter. And this large company decided it was cheaper to buy them than to compete with them. The number on the table, after months of lawyers and diligence and nights where Daniel didn't sleep at all, was $300 million. $300 million. I wrote it out once, longhand, on the back of an envelope just to see all the zeros lined up, and then I put the envelope in a drawer because it made my hands shake. I was not a bystander to this. I want to be very clear about that, because later, the family would try to write me out of my own story, would try to make me into a woman who got lucky standing next to a lottery ticket. In the earliest days, when it was 3 guys and a plan, they had needed someone to keep the books straight, to track the burn, to tell them the truth about how many months of runway they actually had. That someone was me. I did it for free, at night, after my dental group numbers were done, for 2 years. And when the round came in and they finally incorporated everything properly, Daniel and his partners insisted that the equity reflect it. I held a real, small, vested stake in that company. Not because anyone gave me a gift, because I had done the work quietly for years, exactly the way I do everything. The day the deal closed, we were in a glass-walled conference room on the 31st floor of a building downtown. There were lawyers on both sides, a stack of signature pages an inch thick, and a bottle of champagne that someone's assistant had put on ice at the wrong time so it was almost too cold. Daniel signed. His partners signed. And then one of the acquiring company's people slid a page across the table to me because my signature was needed too, and I signed my name, Nora Bennett, in blue ink next to a number I still could not fully believe was attached to my life. When it was done, there was that half second of silence that comes before a room lets itself feel something, and then everyone was standing and clapping, and Daniel crossed the room and put his forehead against mine, and neither of us said anything at all. 6 years. A cracked laptop, a clanking radiator, 9 dinners on rotation, 41 empty chairs. All of it had led to a blue ink signature on the 31st floor. The press release went out on a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. I know it was 9 a.m. because I was standing in our kitchen, a new kitchen now, in a house we'd barely moved into, boxes still stacked in the hall, with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand, watching the story appear. It was on the tech sites first, then the business sections. There was a photograph of Daniel and his 2 partners, and there was a paragraph near the bottom that named the founding team and the early operators who had built the company from nothing. And my name was in it, Nora Bennett, finance from the beginning. 15 words about me in a national story, and I read them maybe 40 times. For about 90 minutes, it was the most peaceful morning I could remember. Just me, and the coffee, and the quiet, and the sunlight coming through a window in a house that was ours. Then my phone rang. It was a number I didn't have saved, so I let it go. It rang again. Then a text came in from my mother, the first message she'd sent me in 7 weeks, and it just said, "Nora, call me." No punctuation. Then another call. Then a text from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be my cousin Rebecca, who I had not spoken to since before the wedding, and it said, "OMG, is this really you and Daniel? So proud of you." 3 exclamation points from a woman who had reacted with a laughing face to the bum's wedding message and never once looked back. And then it started in earnest. The phone did not stop. It genuinely, physically did not stop. My mother, my father, Vanessa, Aunt Carol, cousins I could barely picture. A great uncle I was fairly sure had been at the dog's birthday. All of them, one after another, the calls stacking up faster than I could have answered them even if I'd wanted to. I set the phone face up on the kitchen counter, and I just watched it light up and buzz and skitter a half-inch across the granite with each new call, over and over. A little vibrating machine of 3 years of silence suddenly deciding it had something to say. I didn't answer a single one. I stood there with my cold coffee, and I watched. By that evening, when the buzzing finally slowed, I picked the phone up and looked at the screen. And the little number in the corner of the phone app made me sit down on a box in the hallway. 300 missed calls. 300. I scrolled and scrolled, and it was the same names again and again. The entire cast of my wedding's empty chairs, the whole terrace at Lake Como, every single person who had decided a dog's first birthday was worth crossing an ocean for, but my wedding wasn't worth crossing town. The group chat, the one I had muted for 3 years, had come alive too. When I finally opened it, there were over 100 new messages, and they were all some version of the same thing. "So happy for you, honey. We always knew Daniel was going places. Family sticks together." My Aunt Carol, the same Aunt Carol who had written that it was a relief when I stopped coming to things, had posted, "That's our girl," with a string of heart emojis. I read every one of them, and then I did the thing I taught myself to do 3 years earlier on a curb in a wedding dress. I turned the phone face down on the box beside me. I did not reply. I did not gloat, and I did not cry. I sat in the hallway of my new house, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked, and I felt the strangest, quietest thing settle over me, which was not triumph. It was clarity. Because I finally understood all the way down what Daniel had told me on that curb 3 years before. They weren't sorry. 300 missed calls, and not one of them was sorry. They had simply found out I was worth something now, and they had come for their share of the warmth, the same way they'd gathered around a dog because a dog was fashionable that season. The regret Daniel had promised was coming. I could feel it approaching like weather. But it wasn't going to look like an apology. It was going to look like a family walking straight into a room, certain of their welcome, and finding out the welcome had run out. Daniel came home to find me still sitting on that box in the dark. He looked at the phone, face down, and glowing faintly with another incoming call. And he looked at me, and he didn't have to ask. "They found out," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. He sat down on the box next to me, and for a while, neither of us said anything at all. Then he said, gently, "So, What do you want to do? And for the first time in my life, the answer to that question was going to be entirely, completely mine. I let the phone ring itself out for 2 full days before I listened to a single voicemail, and when I finally did, sitting at my kitchen table with a notepad the way I do everything, I understood that my family had not come back to me. They had come back to the money, and they had brought a script. There were 31 voicemails. I listened to all of them in one sitting, and I made a little tally on the notepad because I wanted to see the shape of it. My mother's was first, and it set the tone for the rest. Her voice had a wobble in it I recognized, the one she used at funerals and when she wanted something. Nora, sweetheart, I saw the news and I had to hear your voice. I'm so proud of you. I always knew you two had something special. I know things have been a delicate pause. Complicated between us, and that's on all of us. That's water under the bridge now. Family is family. Call your mother. Not one word about the wedding. Not one word about the group chat, the empty chairs, the 3 years of silence. Complicated, she called it, as if a weather system had rolled through and no one had actually done anything. My father's voicemail was shorter, and, in its way, more honest because he has never been able to fake warmth for long. Nora, your mother's beside herself. Give her a call. And, when things settle down, I'd love to sit down with you and Daniel. I've got some thoughts on what you all should be doing with, the windfall. The windfall. He'd said it the way another man might say, the harvest. Like it was a communal crop the whole family had a right to bring baskets to. Vanessa's was the one I played twice. My golden sister, whose dog had a better wedding turnout than I did, had clearly worked on hers. Nora, oh my gosh, I literally screamed when I saw my big sister, a total power couple. I always bragged about you. You know that, right? Listen, we have so much to catch up on. I miss you so much, it's actually painful. Let's do a family thing, a real one, everybody. I'll host, I'll do the whole thing. I love you. Call me back, okay? Okay, love you. Bye. I always bragged about you. I sat with that one for a while. I have a phone full of screenshots that say otherwise, and she knows I have them, which is maybe why she was working so hard. Aunt Carol left 2. Cousin Rebecca left 3. The great uncle from the dog's birthday left a rambling one about how he'd always had a soft spot for me. And underneath all of them, running like a current, was the thing none of them would say out loud. Something extraordinary had happened to me, and they intended to be inside the circle of it, and they were betting, based on 32 years of evidence, that I was still the soft one, the one who overthinks, the disappointment who would cave the instant they cracked the door. For a few days, I didn't do anything at all. I let them stew. I noticed, coldly, that the not answering was its own kind of power, one I had never held before. Every unreturned call made them try harder, and every harder try showed me more of what they actually were. The messages escalated from warm to worried to something almost frantic. Did you get my message? Nora, please. Your mother is very upset. We just want our family back. I read them at my kitchen table with my coffee, and I did not feel the old ache anymore. The window I'd spent my whole life standing outside of had, it turned out, been showing me a warmth that was never real to begin with. It was a heat lamp over a store display. It only came on when there was something worth lighting. Daniel, to his credit, stayed out of it. He'd catch me at the table with the phone and the notepad, and he'd just raise an eyebrow, and I'd say, "Not yet," and he'd nod and go back to whatever he was doing. He had told me on that curb 3 years ago to leave them, and he was not about to start managing my family for me, now that the tables had turned. This was mine to handle. He only said one thing, once, quietly, while he was making dinner. Whatever you decide, Nora, decide it because it's what you want, not because it's what they finally deserve. Those aren't the same thing, and the second one won't make you feel better. I wrote that down too, on the notepad, under the tally. Eventually, I called my mother back. I want you to know it wasn't weakness. It was curiosity, and maybe a little bit of a test. I wanted to hear what they'd do if I gave them 1 inch. This is why I love making these stories. People think silence means weakness until the proof is already in the room. Stay with me. We're right at that point. Eventually, I called my mother back. I want you to know it wasn't weakness. It was curiosity, and maybe a little bit of a test. I wanted to hear what they'd do if I gave them 1 inch. They took a mile in about 4 seconds. My mother cried, of course, the funeral wobble in full force. She told me she loved me, that she'd always loved me, that the family had been lost without me, and I let her talk. And then, without so much as a breath between the grief and the ask, she pivoted. Vanessa wanted to host a big family gathering, a proper one, a reconciliation, everyone together again. A welcome home, sweetheart, for you and Daniel, to make things right. She said it like a gift, but I could hear the machinery underneath. It wasn't a welcome home, it was a stage. Whose idea was it? I asked. A tiny hesitation. Vanessa's. She feels terrible, Nora. She wants to do something big to show you how much you mean to all of us. I almost laughed, because I knew my sister, and I knew that Vanessa did not do big for anyone but Vanessa. If she was throwing a party, it was because she needed a party. So after I got off the phone with my mother, I made 2 calls of my own. Not to family, but to a cousin's wife named Priya. The one person married into that family who had ever been decent to me, and to an old college friend who happened to work in the same small city Vanessa lived in. I asked them the same simple question. How is Vanessa actually doing? The answer came back the same from both. Not good. The boutique lifestyle business my sister had built her whole magazine life around, the one funded largely by a loan our parents had co-signed, had been quietly drowning for a year. 2 of her locations had closed. There were vendors she hadn't paid. There was, Priya told me carefully, talk that our parents had put their own house up as collateral to keep Vanessa afloat, and that the well had finally run dry. The dog parties and the rooftop cakes and the 2 years of pure joy had been, like everything my family did, a beautiful photograph laid over a room that was on fire. So that was it. That was the shape of the whole thing, finally clear. They didn't want reconciliation, they wanted a rescue. And they wanted to wrap it in enough hugging and crying that I wouldn't notice I was being asked to bankroll the exact people who had called my husband a bum and skipped my wedding to celebrate a dog. Vanessa's welcome home party was going to be the pitch meeting. The whole family gathered in one warm, catered, softly lit room, all of them beaming at me, and somewhere in the middle of it, an ask. For Daniel's money, for my forgiveness, purchased in advance. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after those 2 phone calls. Then I did something my family would never in 100 years have expected from the disappointment, from the soft one, from the girl who overthinks. I said yes. I called my mother back and I told her, in a warm and even voice, that Daniel and I would be delighted to come to the family gathering, that we were so grateful to be welcomed home, that we couldn't wait to see everyone. I could hear the relief flood down the line, could practically hear her covering the phone to tell my father it had worked. She'd cracked me. The soft one had folded right on schedule. Then I hung up and I opened the drawer where I kept the envelope with all the zeros, and underneath it, the thing I'd carried for 3 years. My phone, and every screenshot on it, the group chat, the bum's wedding, the dog's birthday in Lake Como. It's a relief she doesn't come to things anymore. Amen. The thumbs up my own father had left under the word that was supposed to break me. If Vanessa wanted a room full of family, she was going to get one. I was just going to bring the receipts. Vanessa rented a house for the occasion, and that detail alone told me everything I needed to know before I walked through the door. She didn't host it at her own home or at our parents' house. She rented a 6-bedroom place up on a hill with a view of the water, the kind of house you lease by the weekend to look like a life you don't have. And she strung a banner across the entryway that said, "Welcome home," in gold cursive letters. There were caterers, there was a bar, there was a photographer, the same one, I'd bet, who used to shoot the dog. My sister had spent money she very much did not have to build a room designed to make me feel, for one evening, like the beloved center of a family that had never once put me there. Daniel and I arrived exactly on time. I wore something simple. I was not there to compete with the banner. The door opened and the warmth hit us like a wall. My mother had me in her arms before I was fully inside, crying, saying my name over and over. Nora, Nora, my Nora. My father shook Daniel's hand with both of his and called him son, in a hearty voice I'd never once heard him use in 6 years. Aunt Carol pressed her hand to her heart. Cousin Rebecca actually squealed. And Vanessa came sweeping down the hall in a beautiful dress with her arms wide open, Sir Winston trotting behind her in a little vest, and she folded me into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and said into my ear, "I have missed you so, so much." I hugged her back. I want you to know that I hugged her back and I smiled, and I let them walk me into that gorgeous rented room and put a glass of champagne in my hand and orbit me like I was the sun. For about an hour, I let it be exactly the evening they'd planned. I let my mother tell the story of how close we'd always been. I let my father tell Daniel that he'd always seen something in him. I let Aunt Carol reminisce about a warm family Christmas that, as far as I could remember, had never actually happened. I nodded, and I smiled, and I watched, the way I've watched everything my whole life, quietly, carefully, missing nothing. And I watched the ass come toward me across the room like a tide coming in. It started small, the way these things do. My father got me alone by the window and mused about how smart money moves as a family, how there were opportunities he'd been looking at. My mother mentioned lightly that Vanessa had been going through a rough patch, business-wise, nothing serious. And wasn't it wonderful that family could lean on each other in hard times? The word loan hadn't been said yet, but it was in the room, circling, waiting for the moment. I moved through that rented house slowly, and I let myself really look at it, because the details were the whole story. There were framed photographs on the mantel that Vanessa had clearly brought and staged that afternoon. Pictures of the two of us as little girls, a beach trip I barely remembered, images carefully chosen to say we had always been close. There wasn't a single photo from the last 4 years, because there weren't any. There was a guest book by the door, a guest book, as if this were a memorial for a relationship that had died and was now being pretended back to life. And in the corner, on a velvet cushion, sat Sir Winston in his little vest, the dog who had gotten the ocean and the terrace and the 3-tier cake, dozing through the resurrection of a sister nobody had flown anywhere for. I watched my father refill Daniel's glass twice and lean in close each time. And I watched my mother touch my hair the way she used to when I was small and she wanted something. And I understood that every warm gesture in that room had a price tag turned discreetly toward the wall. I had spent 32 years unable to see those tags. I could see all of them now. The moment came after dinner, when Vanessa stood up and tapped her glass. She gave a speech. Of course she gave a speech. She talked about family and forgiveness and how the last few years had taught her what really matters. She got a little teary. She said she'd made mistakes, that we all had, and that the important thing was that we were together again, stronger than ever. And then, with the whole room warm and misty and turned toward me, she landed it. She said that in the spirit of family lifting each other up, she wanted to propose that we all reinvest in each other. And she looked right at me and Daniel, and she said she had a business plan she just knew we were going to love. A way for the whole family to get in on the ground floor of the next big thing. And wouldn't it be beautiful? Wouldn't it be perfect if the family's good fortune could come full circle and help her rebuild? There it was, out loud, at last, in front of everyone. The rescue, dressed as a reunion. The room turned to me, every face I had grown up under, every person from that terrace in Lake Como, every empty chair from my wedding now filled and beaming and waiting for the soft one to cry and say yes. My mother had her hand pressed to her heart again. My father was nodding slowly, encouragingly, the way you nod at a child you expect to do the right thing. Vanessa stood there glowing, certain, holding out the moment like she was doing me a favor by letting me be part of it. I set down my glass. I stood up. And I felt, rising in me, not the hot flood of anger I might have felt at 25, but something cooler and steadier, something that had been 3 years in the making. The whole room smiled at me, ready for gratitude. Before I answer, I said, I want to tell you all a story. It won't take long. My mother's smile flickered, just slightly. 3 years ago this August, I said, keeping my voice even and warm, almost gentle. My sister threw a birthday party for her dog, for Sir Winston's first birthday. She rented a terrace on Lake Como in Italy, and 19 members of this family got on planes and flew across an ocean to be there. I looked around the room, name by name. Mom, Dad, Aunt Carol, Rebecca, Grandma, God rest her, in her pearls. There's a beautiful album of it. The caption said, "When family shows up, they show up." The room had gone very quiet. Somewhere, the photographer had stopped moving. 3 weeks later, I said, I got married. I let that sit. I sent 48 invitations to this side of the family. I made a seating chart by hand. I paid per plate for every one of you. I could see it landing now, the smiles curdling, my mother's hand coming down from her heart. And on the morning of my wedding, while I was getting my hair done, my own mother wrote in the family group chat that you all had better things to do than sit through, and I'm quoting because I kept it, a bum's wedding. My father left a thumbs up. Aunt Carol wrote Amen. And Vanessa, I turned to my sister, still standing there with her glass, sent a laughing face and a photo of the dog in a party hat. Vanessa's mouth opened. Nothing came out. 41 chairs sat empty at my wedding, I said. I have a picture of the caterer folding the plates back up. I've kept that too. I reached into my bag and I took out my phone. I held the phone in my hand and for a second, the whole room leaned toward it, afraid of what was on it. And then I did something none of them expected. I didn't read the messages out loud. I didn't need to. I set the phone face up on the dinner table, screen glowing with the group chat already open to that morning 3 years ago. The word bum, sitting there in gray text for anyone brave enough to look, and I left it there. I kept all of it, I said quietly, not to use it. I want you to understand that. For 3 years, I didn't do anything with it. I kept it because when your own family tells you you're worthless, a part of you starts to believe them. And I needed the proof that I hadn't imagined it. That's what these are. Not a weapon, a record. Proof that it really happened so I could stop wondering if I was the crazy one. Nobody reached for the phone. Nobody could look at it. Here's what I figured out, I said, and I kept my voice gentle because I wasn't there to scream. I was there to be clear. You didn't fly to Italy because you love Vanessa more than me. You flew because a dog's birthday was fashionable and fun and cost you nothing but a plane ticket. And you're not in this beautiful rented house tonight because you love me. You're here because I'm useful now. 3 years ago, I was a bum's wife, and I brought the mood down. Today, I'm a founder's wife with my own name in the newspaper, and suddenly, there's a banner and a photographer and a guest book. I looked at the welcome home, letters in gold cursive over the door. You didn't come back for me. You came back for the money. And I think, underneath all the crying, every single one of you knows that. My mother started to say my name. Nora, I'm not finished, Mom. It's okay. I'm not yelling. I just want to say the true thing once, out loud, and then I'll go. The room was silent. Even Sir Winston had lifted his head. Vanessa, I said, turning to my sister, who had gone pale and rigid with her speech dying in her throat. I know the business is failing. I know Mom and Dad co-signed the loan and put the house up. And I know the wells run dry. And I know that's really why we're all here tonight. And I want you to hear me clearly, because I'm only going to say it once. I'm not going to bankroll you. Not tonight, not in a plan, not on the ground floor of anything. Daniel and I worked 6 years for what we have, alone, in a one-bedroom apartment none of you ever visited, and we are not going to hand it to the people who called that work a joke. Vanessa's glass was shaking in her hand. You'd let me lose everything, she whispered. Over a party, over some old texts. And that was the moment, right there, that told me I'd been right about all of it. Over a party, over some old texts. Not, I'm sorry we skipped your wedding. Not, I'm sorry we flew across the world for a dog and couldn't drive across town for you. Just, you'd hold a grudge over that? As if the wound had been a scheduling conflict and not a decision they made about my entire worth. No, Vanessa, I said. Not over a party. Over the fact that when I had nothing, none of you were there. And now that I have something, all of you are. That's not family. I don't actually know what that is, but it isn't family. I picked my phone back up off the table. I turned it face down against my palm, the way I'd learned to on a curb in a wedding dress 3 years before, and I slid it into my bag. You're not bad people, I said, and I found that I meant it, which was the strangest part. You're just people who show up for whatever's shining that week. For a while, it was a dog. Tonight, it's me. Next month, it'll be something else. I've spent my whole life trying to be the shining thing so you'd finally show up for me, and tonight, I'm done trying. That's all. That's the whole thing. My father found his voice, and it came out angry because anger was the only place left for him to go. After everything this family has done for you, name one thing, I said, not sharp, just even. Take your time. He couldn't. He opened his mouth and he closed it, and the silence that followed was the loudest thing in that whole beautiful rented house. Daniel stood up beside me. He didn't make a speech. He'd never needed to. He just picked up both of our coats from the back of the chair, and he handed me mine, and he said to the room, kindly, "Thank you for dinner." That was all. That was perfect. We walked out under the gold cursive banner. Behind us, I could hear it starting, the family turning on itself, my mother crying for real now, Vanessa's voice raising, my father saying something about ungrateful, all of them finally, genuinely, feeling something. But not for me, for what they'd lost, for the door that had just closed. The regret Daniel had promised me on a curb 3 years ago had finally arrived, and it looked exactly like he'd said it would. Not like an apology, like people staring at the space where something used to be, understanding, too late, that it had been real and warm and theirs to keep, and they had traded it for a dog in a party hat. Nobody followed us to the car. The calls didn't stop after that night. For a while they got worse, then angrier, then sadder. And then, slowly, over months, they thinned out into nothing, the way a faucet finally stops dripping. I never blocked a single number. I just stopped needing to check. A few weeks after that night, a long letter came from my mother, 4 pages in her careful handwriting, and I read all of it standing at the kitchen counter. It was not really an apology. It was a defense with the word sorry sprinkled through it like salt. She wrote that I had humiliated the family, that airing private matters in front of everyone was cruel, that a good daughter would have found a quieter way. Not one line asked how I was. Not one line said, "We were wrong to skip your wedding." I folded the letter in half and then in half again, and I put it in the drawer with the envelope of zeros and the screenshots, another page for the record, and I felt nothing pull loose in my chest at all. That was how I knew I was finally free of them. The letter that would have leveled me at 25 just went quietly into a drawer. It's a year later now. Daniel and I have a house that's actually ours, unpacked at last, quiet, full of the small, ordinary warmth I spent 3 decades looking for in the wrong room. There's a photo on the wall in the hallway, the only wedding photo I framed. It's not the empty chairs, and it's not the seating chart I made by hand. It's just the 2 of us, on the curb outside that vineyard hall, in a rented suit and a dress I paid for myself, laughing at something neither of us can remember. String lights, blurred gold behind us. 30 people who loved us inside, and 41 empty chairs. And the 2 of us out front, already the whole family we would ever really need. Sometimes my phone lights up on the kitchen table with a number I half recognize. I look at it, and then I turn it face down and I go back to the man in the photo, in the house that's ours, and I let it ring. He was right. One day they did regret it. It just turned out that their regret was never going to be my problem to fix. I'm Clara, and this is my channel. I love making these stories and sharing them with people across the world. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.